I don't know.
Say it with me. I don't know.
Good God, it is liberating. I am a towering mountain of ignorance. I don't know. We're taught to believe that everything has a reason. And so we observe the world, we see what happened, and then we define the thing that happened as the reason the thing happened. But I think a lot of the time we end up mixing up thinking something with knowing something. This is why it can be so impossible to talk about certain topics with certain people. They've tied those suppositions to themselves so tightly with knots of narrative and constructed reality and values that there's just no untying it. And maybe unsurprisingly, in those situations, the best course of action is just to be friends. Maybe even ask them about that thing that they've created, because to them, it's immensely valuable. The world as we perceive it, as we've built it inside of ourselves, is a lie that we tell to ourselves, not out of deception, but out of necessity. We have no other choice. We simply cannot understand the world as it is, and so we construct. But sometimes I just have to tell myself the thing that is definitely true, the truest thing I can say, which is that I don't know.
Never know.
This is the Everyone's Agnostic podcast with Bob Pondillo and Cass Midgley.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 124 of the Everyone's Agnostic podcast. I'm Cass Midgley. Today, Bob and I converse with Kile B. Jones. Kyle gets around in post-Christian circles and is very much a bridge builder. He plays well with Christians, Muslims, other faiths, and interfaith functions. He actively engages with churches in helping them understand that atheists are human too, and helps integrate Darwinism into their faith. Kyle is a Bible scholar with a master's in Sacred Theology and another master's in Theological Studies, both from Boston University. He's the founder and editor-in-chief of Claremont Journal of Religion. He's the founder of Interview an Atheist at Church Day, and we play a clip as an example of what happens there. Kyle is also the founder of the Take Darwin to Church project, which we discuss. He's been published in many scholarly periodicals and has presented at conferences around the U.K. and U.S.A. on religion and philosophy. This is a good talk with Kyle. We talk about current events, which can be problematic for us because I usually give myself 2 to 3 weeks to edit each show, sometimes 4 here at the end of the year. But as a result, for example, the election of president had not happened when we taped this, and in fact has not happened yet as I'm taping this. So some of that is a little dated, but I think it's still interesting, maybe even as we reflect back on how we were feeling in the weeks approaching it. After our talk with Kyle, I'm going to do something I haven't done very often, and that is read a few emails from listeners and Patreon supporters. We've been doing this show for 2.5 years now, and we're up to $47 per episode. I realize I'm not going to be able to give up my 2 day jobs for that, or anywhere close to that. But this little bit gives us a buffer to help pay for unexpected bills, like cars breaking down, or maybe even do something nice now and then, like go see Mark Maron this month as he's in Nashville, or maybe even travel a bit. And don't think I haven't noticed what other atheist podcasts get on Patreon. For example, I never miss a diatribe from No Illusions on the Scathing Atheist. He's a genius. He's really a great writer and thinker. And between his 3 podcasts, which is a lot of work, he gets over $4,500 per episode. That's almost $250,000 a year. Now, I know that's split 3 ways or more than that probably, but even so, I'm a little jealous. And now he has sponsors on top of that. So if I were in it for the money, the realization for me would be, I'm not scathing enough. But Kyle and most of the guests on our show have a different type of atheism that we like to parade, and it's probably never going to be popular. But if you can spare $1 per episode, we would greatly appreciate it. We taped this conversation on October 22nd. We hope to encourage people in the process of deconstructing their faith and help them curb the loneliness that accompanies it. We think the world would be a better place when more people live by sight and not by faith. Please subscribe to our podcast or give it 5 stars, leave a review, wherever you listen to podcasts. Our show's available on most podcast platforms. Also, you can support us monetarily in a few ways. One is you can pledge $1 per episode or more on Patreon. That's patreon.com/EA podcast. Or you can leave a lump sum donation through PayPal at our website, everyone'sagnostic.com. And thirdly, we are running an Indiegogo campaign to raise money for new equipment. Either way, we're grateful for every dollar that you can help. Our opening monologue is an excerpt from a YouTube by Hank Green titled Towering Mountain of Ignorance. The music behind it is Never Know by Jack Johnson. The segue music on this episode is by Sam Mayer, recorded on a handpan in the New York City subway. Thanks for listening, and be a yes-sayer to what is. Well, Kyle, thanks for coming on, man. I know that back when we were originally talking, you were going to do like Ryan Bell and I in the same week or something, and we kept having schedule conflicts.
Yeah, that's fine. I love that guy, Ryan.
Oh,
yeah, he's awesome.
He's a brother of a different mother to me. I mean, we are kindred spirits for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So one of the things that the reason I bring up Ryan's show is that I don't think we're going to get your religious backstory like we normally do. I think people can go hear that and any other place that you've shared your religious background. But one thing that came out in that particular interview for me was that what a rigorous, like when you were a Christian, you were a rigorous student of the Word and probably erred on the side of more of an apologist type researcher. And then when you left there, I think what we've discovered is that we're the same person, whether we're a Christian or whether we're an atheist,
Yeah.
And so those
absolutely.
same disciplines and affinities transferred right over to where you became an avid student of whatever it is that you have your hands to. So you're an academic. I mean, we looked over your resume, and you've got 2 masters in different types of divinity, and you're working on a PhD right now, right?
Yeah, I'm on an indefinite break.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if I'm going back or not.
Oh, okay.
Okay, cool.
So
Yeah.
what were you studying?
Religion and ethics.
Yeah. So this is where you find yourself, and I know. Would you call yourself a bridge builder between some of the different atheisms and religions?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's my modus operandi. That's what I do.
Yeah. So a couple of the projects that you've done, we had Jim Henderson on the show back on episode 33, and I know that he was one of the first guys that I had experienced that was a bridge builder to the extent that he was. Do you know Jim Henderson?
I do.
Yeah. So the video that he did back when I was still a Christian was the lost videos or the lost tapes or something, to where he would invite lost people up on stage at his church or at somebody else's church, and he would interview lost people.
That's interesting.
You mean atheists? Is that
Yeah,
what you mean?
based non-believers.
Non-believers,
But
okay.
Christians consider them lost.
Okay.
I was lost and now I'm found.
Okay. Yeah, gotcha.
And so what Jim was trying to do is he was trying to help his people, or at least Christians, maybe take the ghost away or the demonization of the other, and say these people are real people, and maybe they don't appreciate being called lost, and let's get to know them. And so he would have them on. So your deal, one of the things that you do, what is this? You've done a couple of projects. One is like Ask an Atheist to Church, or what is that project?
Yeah, it's called Interview an Atheist at Church Day.
And so you're the coordinator of those kind of things. How many of those have you done?
Well, myself personally, I've done around 6 or 7, but I've coordinated about 40.
Yeah,
Wow.
I realize it's not just you. You could probably set one up for me here in Murfreesboro if you had the right connections.
I probably could. Yeah, that's basically what I do. When I started, I wasn't doing them myself. I didn't want the project to just be about me. I wanted to coordinate different atheists with different pastors all over the U.S. So So that's what I did primarily. But then after that, I started jumping in and doing a few myself.
Wow. So how do you do it? I mean, you have to find a church that's open-minded enough to even permit.
Yeah, so I have a vetting process on both sides, on the Christian side and the pastor side, and also the atheist side. It's not very sophisticated, but it's kind of a somewhat of a gut sort of feeling about people. I mean, I get to know atheists that are willing to be interviewed, and I want to make sure that they're not the kind of firebrand atheist that's going to go into a church and tell everyone they're delusional and they have a God virus in their brain and they're, so I'm not going to do that. So I vet the atheists, but then I also vet the pastors. There are some pastors that have responded to me and they've sort of talked to me and it seemed like they wanted a debate, which is not what I wanted. No. So I would say, debates have their place, but this is a different thing.
Yeah.
Oh.
So the pastors and churches that reach out to me are generally mainline to progressive churches.
Yeah.
I don't work with Southern Baptist churches or Reformed Presbyterians or any really conservative churches. I work with moderate to liberal churches.
Yeah, right.
Well, they wouldn't work with you anyway, so it's probably a mutual decision.
Exactly. Yeah. If they reach out, every now and then I get some conservative pastors reaching out to me, and once again, what they want is a debate.
Yeah.
Right.
They don't want to humanize an atheist. And this project that I started, I want it to be humanizing. So to humanize atheists for religious persons and church-going people, but to also humanize church-going people and pastors to my atheist friends.
Yeah, I get it. So how do you do it? I mean, is it just, hi, how are you? I'm an atheist. And how does it work?
Well, I probably had a good standing, given that since I was a former youth pastor and Christian, I was connected to lots of different Christians, lots of different ministers. Like was mentioned earlier, my degrees are in theology.
Right.
So basically, when I deconverted and became an atheist, I still had tons of pastor friends. I still had tons of friends that were in the ministry, that were Christians. And so I already had a sort of one-up. So what I did for the first year is I just contacted all of the pastors that I knew personally.
Yeah.
And I just sent them an email or Facebook message and said, here's this project that I'm thinking about doing. Would you be interested? And I just sort of fleshed out what exactly would happen. And then what I would do is put out calls through various atheist media like Friendly Atheist or, humanist groups. They would send out if you're a humanist or an atheist, you want to be interviewed at the church, email Kyle.
Yeah.
And so I'm telling you, hundreds, thousands emails from atheists all over the world saying, hey, I'm an atheist in Melbourne, Australia, or I'm an atheist in wherever, Louisville, Kentucky, or New York, saying I'd be willing to be interviewed. And what I would do is I would just geographically set them up. I'd say, here's this pastor, meet this atheist, go out for lunch and coffee, get to know each other, try to come up with how you want things to go. Because it wasn't really a cookie cutter approach. I don't have I don't have a manual on how to do this because I think that would actually take away from it. I like where it's kind of organic.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, they'd have coffee and they'd meet and they'd set up this interview. And then I always ask to record them. So you can go on YouTube and just type in interview an atheist at church day and tons of videos will pop up.
Wow.
And then I just let it run.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Great idea.
Okay, I'm going to call time out here and insert a clip from one of these interview an atheist at church days at a church called The Gathering in Salem, Massachusetts. The pastor, Phil Wyman, is one of those pastors that looks like he's straight from the Jesus movement. Except now his long hair and ponytail are gray. Full gray beard. He seems like a sweetheart. Their website banner says, short on rules, long on relationships, which sounds pretty cool as churches go. Anyway, he interviews an atheist by the name of Jonas Green, who lives there in Salem. And there are several of these on YouTube if you want to listen further. They're mostly Kyle Jones being interviewed, so I chose this one to hear a different voice. Speaking of voices, Jonas Green, the atheist being interviewed, has an annoying frog in his throat or something. I just want him to clear his throat. It's only 10 minutes long, but bear with it.
Hi, I'm Pastor Phil Wyman from the Gathering in Salem, Massachusetts, and this is our interview with an atheist day that we participated in, something that Kyle Kile B. Jones started. Kyle used to go to church here, and now he's an atheist.
Seemed to change my mind, seemed to change my side.
Well, anyway, here's the interview with my friend Jonas Green, who also happens to be a friend of The Gathering. So, enjoy. So Jonas has been part of this with us before. We had an atheist dialogue with Jim Henderson some years back, and Jonas and two other friend of his and another atheist sat down with Jim Henderson, and so we had this dialogue, not to debate, but to find out
basically how I view the world, and that's more of what this is going to be, sort of comparative, but you'll see when we get to the questions exactly how I view the world, because honestly it's not like all atheists. We are different. You're going to see a little bit about how I see things.
Jonas has his own word. This is his own phrase to describe himself. I haven't heard anybody use it, and I asked him where it came from, and he said, "Oh, that's how I define myself."
That's how I coined this. I call myself basically an agnodeist, which, if you're familiar with theism versus deism, theism is what you preach, where there's a God who may have a plan for you, and perhaps by prayer you find out what that plan is and guide yourself toward that, or you pray to Jesus, and there's an interactive relationship. Fundamentally, I don't believe in any type of God of that sort, be it, Jesus, Muhammad, Allah. But I'm not, a PhD physicist, something like that. So agnodeist means there could have been a God who, as part of a science experiment, said, let me twist the dials and make the gravitational constant this and the speed of light this and so forth. So the entire universe, which is fascinating and wonderful and exciting and all of that, could be an experiment by some type of God, a deistic God, which is to me irrelevant because I have no way to reach him, but I can't say that he didn't exist either. Agno, don't know, deist, could be. It could be a God, could be that type of God.
Now, if I was to think of atheism in a hard sense, that seems like an extension beyond kind of the classical terms of atheism versus agnosticism, and that seems to be a general trend in atheism today. Is that the definition? Is it getting broader?
I think so. From what I've seen, they're all of those terms of weak atheism, strong atheism, and who you ask, do you deny the existence of gods? Do you explicitly not believe in, the God Thor, the God Jehovah? But the key part to me is, while, for example, you have this entire community around you, and these people are definitely here, you need to reach out to those people in times of need or friendship, and it's not that they were, they're not placed here by this other being, this external God. That's how I see it.
So I'm gonna ask him a couple of questions that I know are standard for a lot of people I talk to who want to know how atheists think, or how could you be an atheist? And one of those questions has to do with the structure of ethics and morality, and it's been commonly said down through Christian history that without God anything goes, that there is no moral structure without a God. I know that you don't live that way, and you don't feel that way. So how do you justify or find a place for a moral structure outside of the context of a God who gives us 10 commandments?
Right. Well, there's that classic reply to that, which I won't give you. But we do live in a society.
They might want it.
Oh, do you know the? You don't know that one? The classic reply.
Am I supposed to know that?
Maybe the classic reply is driving on the right side of the road is moral, and driving on the left side of the road is immoral, because A, it's a good idea we thought of and we adopted it, and we could have anyway, or B, only because God told us. So are morals moral arbitrarily because of because this is what God wants, or could we have figured them out without his assistance? That's the classic reply. I take that left-right driving on the road is easy enough because I suppose my morals come from living in 20th century America and things of like how we live here, like I could say monogamy, living together in a classical, traditional husband-wife, children, nuclear family, is generally a good idea. Personally, I'm liberal enough to extend that to single mothers, to gay couples and marriage equality because, of the rights and responsibilities that I feel that they should have. For example, so if you ask me on how I stand on certain issues, I'll give you those issues. But you also find Christians, for example, who are either, for all for marriage equality or they're, the other side of conservative and, marriage should be only man and woman. So it's not just this is what it has to be spelled out in a book,
So do you have a place that you find or you root your moral behavior that you look and you say, this is right because?
Yeah, I think the basic issue has a lot to do with how it affects others. Do I feel empathy towards others? I understand, like, if I do something, it might hurt them, even though it gives me pleasure, and that's a bad thing. So I try to minimize the amount of hurt and try to make the world a better place, be it by contributing to a charity, be it by actively being involved in something, simply taking a stand and voting in an election,
Right. Okay, now I'm going to move to this next thought, and this is a very common thing I hear people say. When I go through difficult times, leaning on God becomes so important to me. I can't fathom going through the hardest things in life without God. How, as someone who doesn't look to a God personally interacting with you, do you handle times?
Yeah, and I think for me, I recognize that there are support services out there, not to mention friends and family, particularly family. I'll give you an example. I was reminded of this recently when I was coming back from vacation, and two friends of ours who were supposed to leave at midnight, the midnight before when we got there, the morning of the airport, they were still waiting for their plane to take off and things like that, and we're like panicky, what do I do, They had each other. They were a husband and wife that, had each other, and they had their strengths to get through. I was stuck once at RPI, it was freshman orientation. I was on my way back. I was at the Greyhound bus station, ready to buy a ticket with a check. And those days I had these starter checks with no name on them, and I didn't have a picture ID because I didn't have my learner's permit yet, that kind of thing. So, they wouldn't accept it. Fortunately, I had a little bit of change. I called Dad, and eventually, and I grew by this experience, Dad was able to wire me money, and I was able to then take a cab to the Western Union, get the money, pay the cab driver. RPI was able to let me stay an additional night, and eventually I was able to get home. Now, all of these things that are set up, just simply to get us out of, that I followed. But two important things. One, had my father needed to come to that Greyhound station to pick me up, then he would have, and I knew that. But I was able to grow and learn from this experience. Along the way, also, I had the most wonderful time interacting with a couple of vagrants who were at the Greyhound bus station. This is true. They bought me coffee. They understood. They listened. They did that every day. And I'm like, shucks, this shouldn't happen to me. I'm above that. I'm upper middle class, yuppie,
Well, it is, and it is building bridges, and I think it's a great thing. And I can see where a lot of atheists would say, "Hey, I'm willing to do it. I would be willing to do it here in Middle Tennessee."
Sure.
All right, this other project that it seems to be that I didn't know you were doing. I mean, I knew you were doing the atheist at church thing, but this Take Darwin to Church project. What is that?
Yeah, so I've hooked up recently, being out here in Phoenix, I've hooked up with some pretty active humanist leaders here. One of them's Evan Clark, one of them's Sarah Blaine. They work a lot with the Secular Student Alliance, the American Humanist Association, and groups like this.
Mm-hmm.
And they basically came to me and said, hey, we know that you're good at working with churches and reaching out to churches. And as part of what's been known as Darwin Day, Darwin Day has been going on for a long time, where every February 12th, which is Charles Darwin's birthday, Darwin would be celebrated by various events with like art or readings or groups or lectures or, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So Evan just basically asked me, hey, can we find a way to bring Darwin to church?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, of course, yeah. So basically it just started, but the first one this year will be on February 12th. So far we have about 12 churches on board, but we're looking to get up to around 25 to 30 for the first launch. And it hasn't had a big press release yet. We're just sort of creating the structure and the documents and everything else, the sort of backbone for it. Mm-hmm. And then the vertebrae, if you will.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we're trying to take it from a single cell organism to a fully formed creature. So right now we're just waiting to finish some of our stuff, and then we're going to have a big press release and everything. And I'm hooking up humanists and scientifically minded atheists with pastors to talk about Darwin's influence, and evolution in churches.
One of the things that's going to happen with this Take Darwin to Church Days, of course, we've got to talk about his deathbed conversion.
Yeah. Yes. I actually didn't think about that. That's funny.
Yeah, they're going to want to. Some of those churches are going to want to. Well, he converted it at the end, right? He repented of all this nonsense.
Yeah, him and Oscar Wilde and Christopher Hitchens.
I was going to say the Hitch, man. The Hitch even warned us. He said people are going to say this about me, and no, right now it's not true.
Yeah. Wow.
Speaking of Hitch, I read that book that pastor wrote about having worked with him so much, and kind of tried to spin it to where Hitch was secretly had his own faith, because the title of the book is The Faith of Christopher Hitchens.
Oh boy! Did
you read that one, Kyle?
I have not.
Don't bother.
I don't know if I'd be able to stomach it, to be honest.
Well, I sat through it. I did it on audio in my commute, and there was a couple of times I wanted to punch the guy. So, speaking, I told you we weren't going to do your backstory. We've got your 2 projects that you're doing, and I'm happy to promote those. And I'm a bridge builder as well, and I'm eager to promote all the efforts that you put forth to help relations between the various spectrums of religiosity and non-religiosity.
Could you, Kyle, could you just sketch for me, since I haven't heard that, where Kyle came from in terms of religion? What background?
In a nutshell, I was a conservative evangelical Christian, a Protestant of the Reformed persuasion. I was a youth pastor. And for about 3 or 4 years, and then I went to seminary, then I went to higher education, I went to school at Boston University, slowly started deconstructing my views, and over the course of a couple of years, decided I was an atheist.
Gotcha. What denomination were you, or tradition?
Well, many. When I first converted, I was part of a Pentecostal church, but then I started changing my theology and became a Reformed Presbyterian.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So Calvinist.
That's enough for me. Thank you very much.
Well, now you got me curious. Were your parents religious?
No.
Okay, so this was you. This was all you.
This was all me.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so at any point, especially with your Pentecostalism, did you consider yourself in a personal relationship with Jesus?
Oh yeah, the whole born again,
best friends,
chatty.
Oh, absolutely.
You like that word, chatty?
Yeah, kind of. Always talking to Jesus.
Yeah,
and stuff.
I was.
Jesus was my boyfriend.
Yeah,
absolutely.
There's that.
I hear Cass,
and you're the bride of Christ, right?
You say that.
Yes, oh yeah, it's pretty. I can proof text it. Okay, so one thing I thought would be fun is just to pick your brain about some current events. And we don't normally do current events here on the show, but I'm curious, and by the time this comes out, this will be relatively old news, but I think it's a pertinent question and will be for some time, and that is the concept of deconverting from Christianity and then reconverting back.
We've just heard about that today.
Yeah.
Are you talking about Teresa McBain?
Yes.
Teresa McBain,
Yes.
and also this Science Mike McHargue. Are you familiar with Science Mike?
No, I'm not.
Well, there's a podcast called The Liturgist, and it's Michael Gungor and Mike McHargue, and that's spelled like MCHARGUE, I think.
McHargue.
And they're Christians, and there was a season where Mike, and he kind of goes by Science Mike. He's not actually a scientist, so I'm not sure about that. But anyway, he became an atheist, and ultimately I've heard Teresa McBain's 30-minute video, and I've heard his story. He actually came to Nashville last week, and I went to hear him live. And there seems to be a degree of it where, there's that elasticity thing where when they go back, there's no way they're going to be as fundamentalist as they were.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
However, they're going back to what Krista Tippett calls her mother tongue, and that she was raised with it and she no longer believes it, note for note, but they hang on to it as opposed to burning the whole house down. They salvage parts of it, and I think that's kind of what we're talking about. So, did you get a chance to see Teresa McBain's video?
I did not, but I've seen. I'm Facebook friends with her, and I've seen a lot of her posts. So
yeah, me too.
I kind of get the gist of it.
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, she's the one that was, she showed up to like FFRF convention or maybe an American Atheist convention or something, and they put her on stage, and for the first time that she ever told anybody, she was, had a microphone, a big audience, and she said, "I'm now an atheist," and she was a former, evangelical Christian. Yeah. So she got catapulted to the limelight really quick. Then New York Times or something got a hold of her resume, in which she had said that she got a divinity degree from Duke. Duke. And it turns out she never finished the degree, and so it was kind of getting caught in a lie. And she, I don't know. She's had a rough go from the get-go.
Yeah.
Sometimes what goes on in your heart and mind needs to stay there for a while. And and even now, I would say her deconversion, she decided to make that super public right away. And I don't know. I don't know if she's got almost like Trump, maybe an addiction to the limelight or what?
Could be. I don't know. Could be. But why do you suppose people do that then, Kyle?
Yeah. Well, I think I had a discussion the other day with one of my Muslim friends, and he was saying that most of his comrades were raised Muslim and have stayed Muslim, and that's like sort of a good thing. It sort of proves the veracity of what it is to be Islamic. And my response to him was, it may actually be probably is a positive thing to change your views throughout your life, right? Yeah, so if you hold the same views that you held as a child, or that you held as an adolescent, or that you held as a teenager, if there hasn't been some sort of development, I feel like there's a stagnation.
Of course.
Now, that also doesn't mean that we should just kind of willy-nilly go all over the place whenever we want. Of course, that's our right to do so. People can believe whatever the hell they want as long as they're not harming anybody.
Yeah, but they don't want to be like what Paul described, a reed swayed by the wind.
Exactly. Well, it makes it seem like, there's those certain people that jump from one fad to another.
Sure.
And what you do is when you see somebody like that goes from one fad to another, you kind of step back and go, well, how much can I actually trust like their enduring character? Right? And so
absolutely.
I think there is something to changing our views and being flexible and malleable, but there is also something to having at least some sort of stability, I think, in your identity. And so as far as Teresa, as far as I can say, now I don't really know her personally, but as far as I can say, I wish her all the best.
Yeah.
And once again, I certainly don't want to do what Christians do to atheists, who like myself, they'll say, well, he was never really a Christian.
Yeah.
Or he still is secretly a Christian. He's an anonymous Christian.
Yeah.
You know, I prefer for people to take me at my word as far as how I self-identify.
And so you want to do unto others here.
Exactly. I would prefer they take my understanding of myself at face value.
Here's one of the things that I didn't want to do, just kind of like what you're saying with Teresa, is Christians say to me, and have for the 10 years that I've been deconverting, well, he was burned by the church. He was hurt by Christians. And the truth is I was on some committees with Teresa where she was mistreated. I saw her. Anyway, I saw Teresa get roughed up a little bit in the atheist community, and I didn't want to be the guy that says, "Well, she went back because she got burned by the atheist."
Yeah.
So there's two things you've mentioned. One, and that is, well, he never was, or she never was. Mm-hmm. There's this, you got hurt, and now you're crawling back to mommy or to comfort. And the third one is, you've got an agenda to get a book deal.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I know I've heard people say that about her.
Really? You think
is that
does?
she crossed over in hopes that she'd get a book deal. When she didn't get one, she thought, well, I guarantee you the Christian publishers will take me back. You know?
Oh, wow. I hadn't thought of that.
So but all of those three are disrespectful of her autonomy and agency as a human moral agent. So
yeah.
Absolutely.
But one thing I did see, and I think I just read one article because that's how I knew about it, and I sent you that article, and you already knew. She was caught up in the music and caught up in
those
the
are the two things she said. She broke her heart. It broke her dad's heart that she left. Her dad's a preacher.
Okay.
And even though he's fundamentalist and she will never share that faith with him, he's at least happy to take her back. And she feels, I know that there's some mending that has gone on by her returning to her roots. Secondly, like you're saying, she was and is a musician, was involved in praise and worship. And it was a particular song that she references in her 30-minute video on her website.
Right.
I forget the name of the band, but it's a Christian band. Yeah. And she was listening to that song, and it moved her.
Right. And we've talked about this, I don't know how many times before, about how music, literally does lift you in many ways.
Yeah.
I mean, lifts you somehow and transcended, but not in in my case, not in a religious way, but
emotional.
Yeah, some kind of emotional thing is happening.
Yeah.
And so that must be it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh.
So I don't know. I was looking over our mutual friends, and of our 60 or so mutual friends, 18 of which have been guests on this show. So I know as a bridge builder, Chris Johnson's documentary, you're friends with Chris. You're familiar with his movie?
Yeah, A Better Life.
A Better Life. And there's a bridge builder, right?
Sure.
Yeah. What'd you think of that documentary?
I have yet to see it.
Okay.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah. No, it's great. We had him on. That was episode 115. And I'm just going down the list here. So how about Dan Arrow? He's kind of a firebrand atheist, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I'm not a fan myself.
Okay, but you are a friend on Facebook.
Sure, yes. Yeah, being a friend on Facebook can be a very imprecise barometer.
Yeah. So are you familiar with Greta Vosper and her journey?
Yeah, I did an interview an atheist at church day at her church in Canada.
Oh, you did? Like she had you on?
Wow.
She had me on, even though she herself is an atheist. She was one of the first people, our first year at Interview an Atheist at Church Day, to do an interview with her and Catherine Dunphy, who is part of the Clergy Project.
Okay.
Right.
And they did an interview. See, once again, I had for May 5th, I believe it was 2010 or 2011 when it first came out. That year, there were about 30 churches doing it the same day.
Okay.
Wow. How about that?
On Cinco de Mayo. So she was one of them to do it that first time. So I've known Greta for a while, a few years. I went up to Canada, spoke at her church with her. She's a fantastic person. I consider her a friend. I actually call her and talk to her on the phone.
Wow.
So
she is a terrific lady.
She's amazing.
Terrific. Absolutely.
Oh, she's fan. And you know what? If you haven't met her in person, she's even better in person.
Yeah, I have met her. Yeah. I also consider her a friend, and we Skype about every 2 or 3 months, and with some of the folks from Life After God with Ryan and Jeff Straka down in Atlanta.
I know Jeff.
Yeah.
Boy, what a sad story about Greta. What's going on with her? Do you know?
Not anything more than what she puts out or what people are putting out about her. But she's basically under review. She was found not fit for ministry in the United Church of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's funny, too, because the United Church of Canada is really progressive.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're talking, there are small pockets here or there that are very loud and conservative. But there are tons of very liberal, very progressive, almost Unitarian Universalist types of pastors. And lots of them, I'm sure there's lots of them that don't believe in the same God. They may not consider themselves an atheist, but they don't believe in the God that has like a literal hell or the God that, judges other people that aren't Christian, just a very progressive view of God.
Right.
So it's strange to have this going on with Greta, considering that, she's really not alone.
No.
Sure.
She's just vocal.
And you can probably relate to this. Greta says, look, I'm a student of the United Church of Canada. I went to your seminaries, and this is what you taught. And I so much of the time in seminary, pastors are kind of shown under the hood of how this thing really ticks, and it's not all as cohesive as the lay people want it to be or think it is.
Right.
And so you're in a tough place as a pastor. Do I lie to the people, or do I have to unlearn everything I just learned in order to go be in the public?
Yeah. I mean, it really is an indictment of United Church of Canada, I think.
Yeah.
Personally.
It is. And what it is, though, is, once again, it has a lot to do with a handful of really conservative leaders in the church that are basically staking like a witch hunt on her.
Wow.
And trying to garnish like popular opinions to try to banish her from the ministry. It's very medieval.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
Kyle, haven't you noticed that there's a lot of, whatever you want to call it, drawing lines in the sand or digging in their heels, or when Christians, what they call the slippery slope, when they sense that we're going to lose something very valuable here if we give one more inch of ground to these progressives. And so there is a bit of a last gasp or of a urgency to say, we cannot let this go, or it's going to be a landslide or an avalanche.
We must challenge it, absolutely.
Yeah, I thought you were going to quote Karl Marx there, saying religion is the last gasp of a dying person.
Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been a little more firebrand. But no, it is. I feel like it's a culture war too. It really is.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
You see this a lot. I'd say in the U.S. you see this in the Presbyterian Church U.S.A, the PC-USA. So for a long time, the PC-USA has been battling over the same-sex marriage. Can homosexuals be Christian and be in good standing in the church? Can homosexuals be ministers? They've been battling this for like 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, they've come across as affirming in the last couple of years. They sort of erred on the progressive side. But what that did to all these conservative pastors, or what conservative pastors did in response to that, was leave the denomination.
Yeah.
So it created all kinds of splits and lots of churches leaving, lots of pastors leaving. But a lot of it's about drawing out the boundaries and lines for what one person thinks counts as Christian.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about, and a lot of atheists, anybody in a social group with a social identity does this. We talk about who is the true Christian, who is the false Christian,
No
who
true
is the
Scotsman.
no true Scotsman, exactly. But it's because these identities mean so much to us. These there are ways people always go. A lot of my really, really liberal friends that I call like dirt eating hippies, they're like no, don't even. Why do you even call yourself an atheist? Why? Don't use any label. Like, labels are inherently bad. And my point is, well, labels can be used for bad, and they have been.
Yeah.
But labels are important ways that people identify in the world and navigate through life. They mean something to people. They have import.
Yeah.
And so atheism, to me, it's not like I'm trying to put a huge flag up and circle my wagons, and it's meaningful to me.
Yeah. Well, and I think we're talking about very nuanced things, and this is a lot of subjects that could be, pulled underneath, this umbrella of nuanced, and that is in what Bart Campolo talks about in tribalism, or competition for that matter. Like in some contexts, especially when two friends are competing, that's great. Great things can come of that because they're urging and budging each other to greater greatness. But when enemies compete, it gets ugly. And the same with tribalism. And like, we need community. We're tribal animals. We're pack animals. We are better. It naturally selects for us to actually get along better when we're in community. And so tribalism has got this bad rap of like, identifying with a tribe is bad, or it's alienating, or it's, elevating yourself at the expense of others or whatever. And it doesn't have to be.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you're saying about, this thing with these conservatives versus liberals or whatever. It's much more nuanced than that. And I think somebody like you, Kyle, that are navigating these two worlds and building bridges between them, I think you understand that.
Yeah, it's being able to recognize. I think it's being able to recognize that your identity and your labels and the way that you find yourself in this world are important to you, but they're not so important as to demean other people.
Right.
They're not so important. I'm not going to die for atheism.
Right.
I'm not going to harm anybody for atheism, but I do think it's important to counteract stereotypes and stigmas and caricatures of what an atheist is.
Right.
Sure.
And that's, for me, it's more of a move of solidarity.
Yeah.
I am actually literally an atheist, meaning I don't believe in any gods.
Yeah.
But I care more about using the term atheist to try to counteract, like, I'm an atheist and I do my best to not be an asshole. Like, hopefully that will counteract when somebody watches, God rest his soul, Christopher Hitchens. They may think, and no offense, he's influenced me a lot. He's a lot of wit and bravado, and he can flip a phrase up and down.
Yeah.
But he comes across as a pretty arrogant jerk,
Yeah.
and so I want to sort of counteract that notion that, like, oh, that's what all atheists are like. They're like House, like in the show House. They steamroll people. They're overly confident. They're arrogant. They're intellectually pompous. Yeah. It's like, no, not all atheists are like that. Just like not all Muslims are like this, or not all Christians are like that. So I think it's finding that delicate balance between the meaningfulness of your identity and then also realizing that there are other important factors outside of just how you identify.
Yeah. Well, and this is why I say that this problem applies to just about anything, and I think it comes back to the person. And by that I mean, if somebody is deeply insecure and maybe they hate themselves, or they're so afraid of dying, or they're so afraid of being wrong, or there's some ominous threat like hell or heaven hangs in the balance, I've got to get this right. So there's urgencies that make a person attached to an identity or an identifier with such vehemence that they could say, I'm a Cocoa Pebbles and you're a Fruit Loops, and they will kill you over that because they're so internally insecure. So it has everything to do with their self-image, right, and less to do about Cocoa Puffs. And that's why I think so this is where it comes out in patriotism versus nationalism. It's however you show up. So if you have put on the hat of atheist and you're a dick, and then you become a Christian, you're going to be a dick Christian.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I'm saying.
That's what you were saying earlier too. Is like a lot of your when you deconvert or change views, you're still somewhat the same person.
You absolutely are. I always say this, that everything, when I became an atheist, everything changed and nothing changed.
That's true.
That's good.
Kyle, you were talking about the culture wars when we were talking about Greta. And, here in the United States, there's clear statistical evidence that shows there's a change going on. The nuns are increasing, NONES, nuns are going up. Do you find the same, or do you know, is it the same way in Canada? Is there a big shift up there as well?
Well, Canada, I'm certainly no expert on Canadian life, but from what I do know, Canada has always been a bit more progressive than the U.S.
Yeah.
It has been for a while. The
Yeah.
prime ministers, for instance, have been somewhat more progressive, but there are, I'd say on the whole, they're more liberal than the U.S., but they still have a lot of conservative people.
So this is, just as we said, this is a big bulwark. This is it, man. They're drawing the line in the sand, and they're gonna do what they can to make sure that Vosper doesn't get to be a minister anymore, apparently.
Yeah, that's basically it. Yeah.
Wow.
She is also a symbol, I think. I mean, knowing her as a person, I don't want to reduce her to a symbol. She's obviously more than that.
Oh, no,
but I think her stance and her being an outspoken atheist is sort of symbolic for how the United Church of Canada is handling difference right now in 2016. And so, history will show what sort of line they err on, but it seems like they're erring on the conservative side.
Yeah. So, Kyle, did you get a chance to see this Alfred Smith dinner with the Catholics and
Trump
and Clinton and Trump were there? Well, maybe it's a mute question then, but I will say that when I was watching it, and I watched the whole thing, for one thing, this is where my firebrand comes out. Because I'm a bridge builder, I play well with others, I dance with Christians, I have Christians on this show, and I play nice. And I love like David Dark and Stan Mitchell and some of these progressive Christians that have been on the show. I could hang with those guys 24/7. I mean, I'm
Sure.
good. Yeah. However, I when it comes to why I have no idea why Catholics have such cultural power over the world. And I don't know why a woman would ever darken the door of a Catholic church. I don't know. I just don't understand the respect. Like this dinner, they raised $6 fucking million that night. And it's for this children's fund thing, probably to heal them from all, I won't go there.
That's right.
But all the hiding of child rape and pedophilia, all the misogyny that to this day, they will not allow a woman priest or a woman to teach or whatever. I mean, I just don't understand. And so to have the two presidential candidates there and seeing all these, they're popes, not popes, but they're
bishops.
It was
cardinals.
Cardinal Dolan.
Yeah, and they're sitting next to Trump and Clinton as if they're somebody. And to me, they are nobody. And I was even embarrassed to see a grown man talk about, like he's thanking everybody for coming, including the presidential candidates. And then he says, but ultimately we must thank the Lord. And I'm just like, what? I mean, that's just how far out I am when it comes to atheism. But in general, I was just going to ask you, I know that as a bridge builder, you're nice with Christians and religious people. But where do you go with the anger? Where do you put the stuff that like the respect that the Catholics get that I don't think they deserve?
Well, it's the cultural power and the political power that they have too.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult balance. So I always talk about how there are different approaches to different people. Once again, just to give you an example, on Thursday night I was at the Secular Student Alliance here at Arizona State University debating an evangelical Christian named David Wood.
Okay.
And we had this big fiery debate, and it went really well. But here I am. I'm normally like the bridge building, sit on a panel with Muslims, Jews, and atheists and Christians and whoever.
Interfaith stuff.
And interfaith stuff, or interview an atheist at church day, or take Darwin at church day. Very bridge building stuff. But there are times, as Solomon says, for anger.
Yeah, it's a time for this, a time for that, yeah.
So basically what I'm saying is that the interfaith, diplomatic, nice, jovial approach is good, but that doesn't need to be the only way that people can approach others.
Yeah.
Right? So I do think there is a role for people like David Silverman or whoever, even though I may disagree with 90% of what comes out of their mouth, or at least the method, the means by which they communicate, how they engage in their method of presentation. But there is a time for people to stand up. What is it? This is one Rage Against the Machine song where it pops and Zach LaRocca's like, anger is a gift.
Yeah.
You know, like there are times where anger is a gift and there's this time to speak out and say no as opposed to like, let's all hold hands. And to be honest with you, when I look at Cardinal Dolan, who I have nothing but disrespect and unease with as a human being, to see him and other lofty bourgeois politicians and whoever just kind of congratulating themselves in their own self-deprecating glory, I feel nauseous. It's probably one of the reasons I didn't watch it, because it really, it gives me unease. Now, I do know Catholics. I am friends with Catholic priests. In fact, not to plug anything, but I'm currently working on a book with a Catholic priest.
Cool.
Because there's lots of books out there between an atheist and a Protestant pastor, but there's no books out there between an atheist and a Catholic priest.
No.
So
time to make one.
Yeah, and we're tregging through. So he's an awesome man. I love him to death. Of course, he's really critical of how the church has handled all of these things. He's I don't know if I'd call him liberal, but he's very moderate, I guess might be, or middle path sort of Catholic priest. So, but yes, the abuses within the Catholic Church, all the historical injustices and violence, the anti-gay stuff, the anti-feminist stuff, the sending money in horrible directions, the super wealth of Vatican City and the Vatican, the hierarchy from the Pope down. I'm all really iconoclastic and anarchist about the whole thing. Like, I think it's problematic. Like, I forget who said it, but I thought it was genius. Was I have just as much authority as the Pope does. I just don't have enough people to believe it. Yeah. You know?
Exactly. Well, honestly, I'm kind of looking for permission to feel like I feel, and you just gave it to me. So
there you go.
Sometimes you're right. A little bit of anger does do you well. You know?
We've been quoting scriptures this whole show, and I think it was Paul said, "Be angry and sin not."
Okay, whatever that means.
See, I don't know. I think I could do the former, but not the latter.
Be angry and sin away.
Go for it. Just a little.
So a couple other things. All right. So I was looking over my notes, and I noticed that on the interview An Atheist at Church Day, that's how I was first introduced to Neil Carter. Did you arrange that interview, or?
Yep, he was one of the first during that 30 across the U.S. the first year. I set him up with that pastor in Mississippi.
He's great.
That was my first exposure to him, and we've had him on the show twice.
Brilliant.
Oh, Neil is my guy, man. Me and him go way back, and I've had nothing but support for him. I love what he does. He's a fantastic writer.
He is.
He really is.
He's a great speaker. He's a very tender soul. So I think he's fantastic. He represents a lot of what I think is healthy and good in the atheist community.
Yeah, me too. Mm-hmm. In fact, like I said with my the Brothers of a Different Mother, I feel that way with Neil and Ryan both, and have for some time. But we've had Neil on the show twice, episode 27 and 97, and then Ryan back on episode 32. He had me on his show, and it's about time we had him back on.
Sure.
But, anyway, all right, so one last question about David Brooks. Are you familiar with David Brooks?
The name rings a bell, but
New York Times writer, book writer.
Oh, yes. Yeah, David Brooks.
Sort of a conservative, I think.
He's kind of conservative, and in recent years, he's using more religious language in his last couple of books, and he's... Anyway, so I guess since you're not that... I thought maybe you were, really onto him. What about E.J. Dionne?
Oh, yeah, I know E.J. Dionne. I've actually met him. I've had breakfast with him. He's a sweet guy.
Well, he and David Brooks are recent guests on Krista Tippett's On Being program. Uh-huh. And a lot of times she plays shows from 4 years ago. I mean, sometimes they're archived, brought them out of the basement and played them again. But this one was literally taped this week after the first debate. Okay. And they do talk politics. Mm-hmm. And but interestingly enough, I found E.J. Dionne to really I resonated with his tone and how he juggles religion and politics and humans. Just he was really sharp, and I'd never heard of him before. And so I'm probably gonna look more into what he's up to and what he's written and things.
Oh, he's a big name at the Washington Post. Yeah.
Yeah, Washington Post. I think he considers himself a liberal Catholic.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, he's a really sweet guy. When I sat down and had breakfast with him, this is actually when I first met Greta, he was just very jovial and kind-hearted and, just kind of the grandfather you always want,
Yeah, but I think he's a genius. Like
he's a smart guy.
He puts together sentences on the fly that are just beautiful.
But see, that's what you need, I feel. I feel like you need to have that balance between this uber intelligence and this embodied,
absolutely
warm-hearted thing.
That's it. Mm-hmm. That is it. Yeah. That's exactly what I look for in a hero, is they've got a big heart and a big mind.
Yeah.
And both. And that's it in a nutshell. Okay, so on a couple of light note questions, what do you do for fun?
What do I do for fun? Well, after this, I'm picking up my friend, and we are going to barbecue and have a couple beers.
All right.
Because beer is proof that God loves us and wants us to be happy.
Benjamin Franklin.
That's right. All right.
So what kind of are you reading anything right now?
I'm always reading something. Currently, I've been reading David Hume. I'm a big David Hume fan.
Okay.
Right.
But I am actually going to be performing my first marriage ceremony next year with two of my really great friends, Courtney and John. They're getting married in Pasadena next year, and I'm the one that set them up like 5 years ago.
Wow.
I brought them out. I was like, you guys would get along, and we all just kind of hung out, played miniature golf, and then I just faded into the mist,
Yeah.
And so anyway, so they asked me to perform their marriage ceremony. So they're really big fans of David Hume. So I'm skimming through all the David Hume stuff to try to find good quotes about like love and marriage. And unfortunately, it's very hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think.
It's not.
He'll tell you about philosophy and the external world and mind independence, but he's not going to say much about, tender love.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope.
Oh, well.
What kind of, are you a movie watcher? I mean, have you seen a good movie lately?
Oh, okay. First of all, movie watcher is too low. All right, I'm a snob. All right,
okay.
I am a film and cinema buff.
Okay.
All right. So what I watched recently, which isn't a recent movie, because I usually can't stand recent movies, is with my mother. I watched A Streetcar Named Desire.
Okay.
Wow. Yeah,
now,
50s.
That is a fantastic movie. I love 60s movies. I love Hitchcock. Anything by Hitchcock, anything with Gregory Peck, anything with Humphrey Bogart, or, all these actors.
All the classics.
I love all the classics. That's what I like now, and I can tell I'm an old ass man now because I'm hanging out with my mom watching Hitchcock movies.
Yeah. Well, what about weird modern movies like what is that? Spotless Mind, Sunshine.
Oh, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Beautiful movie.
Okay, you ready for this? Ready for this?
Yeah.
Okay. Eternal sunshine of the spotless mind, every prayer requested, each wish resigned. Grace shines around her in serenest beams, and whispering angels prompt her golden dreams.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
Alexander Pope. It's a fantastic poem. But that's a great movie, absolutely.
Yeah. What about,
I would say Spotlight. I recently saw Spotlight.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's about
exposing the Catholic.
Exactly.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
That was fantastic.
Well done. Yes.
Best picture.
Yeah, and I'm not of that sexual orientation, but if I had to marry someone, it would be Mark Ruffalo.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
So, yeah.
He's great in that. In fact, he got an Academy Award nomination for that performance.
Yeah.
He did a great job.
Yeah, it was that was a recent movie that I thought was fantastic.
Well, enjoy whatever you're grilling and whatever you're drinking. Are you a dark beer guy?
I am a pale ale and IPA man myself.
All right.
I go dark.
You go dark.
That's me.
You like your beer like you like your coffee, huh?
Exactly, in a cup.
I'm a downstream swill guy. Like I was raised in Oklahoma on Coors Light.
Oh,
and shit.
You like the light stuff.
But I don't even drink beer anymore. I'm just a strictly gin and tonic guy.
That's right.
So
okay, well maybe you do belong in the 60s.
That's right.
Well, Kyle, thanks for giving us an hour of your day, and it's been fun, and appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cass and Bob. You guys rock.
Kyle Jones, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
He was great. I enjoyed him.
He's been in the movement, if you will. I know everybody's kind of in debate whether it's actually a movement or not, but I mean, who cares?
It's out there.
There's stuff going on where we're, and he and I are very similar in the sense that we both have degrees in history in ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I got my master's in theological studies after my deconversion.
Right.
Because I still care about this stuff. One of the ways that you influenced my life before...
Me, Bob? Me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Was you were the one that gave me the confidence and encouragement to go get my master's.
Okay.
And you already knew that I had deconverted, but yet you and I both, coming from very polar opposite ends, are still fascinated with the anthropology of why humans do what they do, especially when it comes to religion.
Right. It informs so many things, and it's what a study. What a great study.
It's a great study. We're doing it.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of weeks ago on the show that you're getting a master's degree in it by simply being on the show. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kyle is that guy. I mean, he's got 2 masters in it. He's working on a PhD in it, and yet he's an atheist and has been for some time. But he's fascinated with it too. So I think there's kindredness there in he and I and you,
right.
In that we share this interest, that we want to be a part of the solution, not the problem, that we want to oil the wheels of kindness and compassion and empathy and community.
Yes.
And that which divides us, which we now find ourselves in 2 Americas. And I don't mean just north and south. We live right next door to each other, and we literally can't believe that the other likes blank.
Right. Pick a candidate.
I can't believe that you would vote for Trump. I can't believe you would vote for Clinton. I mean, we are miles. And it's not just I can't believe you don't believe in God. I can't believe you do. So these are things that divide us.
Right. And by this time, when this show airs, there'll be a new president, by the way.
We don't know it right now.
We don't know who it is. So.
That's true.
Yeah.
Wow. So anyway, I'm just saying that Kyle is one of those guys that is a kindred spirit to me. And, the fact that he was really praising the work and the character of both Neil Carter and Ryan Bell. I mean, those 2 guys are my brothers.
Yeah, they're brothers.
And so I feel like I've met another brother. And we have tried several times to get with Kyle, and we've had conflicts. Even today, we had technical difficulties twice. And so I feel like God doesn't want us to talk to Kyle. That's the old me. The old me would say, there's too many obstacles here. You know what the funny thing back in those days was, you could say, the devil is really trying to stop us. We must be doing something right. That's one way you could spin hardship and opposition.
Yeah.
The other way is the complete opposite. Wow, God's real. This is not flowing, and I don't feel the wind beneath my wings that I would if God were behind this. I think that God's opposing this. And so you can literally spin it both ways. There's a place in the Bible where Balaam is a guy that's riding a donkey, and he's trying to go from point A to point B on this donkey, and the donkey stops in his tracks. Balaam starts whipping it, and it won't go. It won't go forward. Eventually, it lays down.
Because it's a fucking donkey. It does what it wants. Anyway, go ahead.
Bob, don't interrupt. Don't interrupt my master narrative.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So eventually, he's beating the donkey, and the donkey talks to him.
Of course.
And because God, somehow, I don't remember the whole story.
Well, what did the donkey say? You got me interested.
I forget. But it was God was basically trying to thwart his efforts to go to this other town.
Ah, okay.
And so what I'm saying is, you can spin obstacles and hardship as God's trying to stop me. I don't know. Anyway, the other one is Jonah and the well.
Oh, okay.
Like Jonah was trying to go someplace. He was trying to elude God's plan for his life. God told him to go to Nineveh, and he said, "Nope, I'm not going." And they threw him overboard, and then a whale swallows him and spits him out on the shore of Nineveh.
Right, a large fish.
Yeah.
Not a whale, a large fish.
So God intervened to make something happen where the human was actually opposing it. So I'm just
it just sounds like a great little fairy tale.
It's a lot of gymnastics for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we say all the time.
Yeah.
Remember that time that Slink, former guest of the show?
Yes.
He started a thread on Facebook where it was the top top 15 words used on this show.
And every time you say you take a drink or something, is that it?
Well, those are the drinking games. Yeah,
Yes.
There's that every time we say hegemony.
Hegemony, take a drink.
And that was a different guy.
Okay.
He wrote in and said, every time you guys say hegemony, I take a drink. But,
Okay.
you know.
But what did Slink
Well,
do?
just all these words that we repeat. And I know one of them is mental gymnastics or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And the thread became everybody coming up with the words that we repeat.
Okay.
I don't know. So the top 30 words, according to that thread, started by Slink, are hegemony, credulity, ontological, certainty, agency, inerrancy, secular, woo-woo, epistemology, volitional, community, humanist, difference, transcendent, epiphany, woo-woo, nuanced, wow, narrative, fuck, cognitive dissonance, mental gymnastics, meaning-making, storytelling, pattern-seeking, creature, drank the Kool-Aid, apologist, firebrand, fundamental, reason, zeitgeist, apostate.
Well, I mean, that's because those are the words. What can we say?
Yeah.
And there's a similarity. And when I say this quite frequently, there's a similarity between all the people we talk to, but there's always little twists, little nuances and turns, which makes the show interesting to me, anyway.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Because every human is interesting.
Yeah.
That song that we played, I ended up using it for Zoe's episode.
Yes, I heard that.
And it was it was called The Riddle. And what's the meaning of life? You and I. And that is the meaning for us naturalists and non-theists and non-supernaturalists, is that what's the point? And it is you and I.
Us.
You and I,
Yeah.
Bob, our friendship, our wives, our children, and our friends, and meeting people, even the guests of the show, enhance my life.
Yeah.
I was talking about my dog Polo enhances my life.
Poor Polo.
At this point, he hasn't passed yet, but he is dying, and it's hard to watch.
Yeah. I love that little dog. It's an old dog, by the way.
Yeah, he's over 15. I don't know.
And I don't think he knows what's going on anymore.
No, he never has, obviously. But
True. But, I mean, he doesn't even look at me. He just sort of walks around.
yeah, he
paces
seems
around.
really senile right now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Anyway.
But Kyle Jones is a great
Yeah.
guy, and he's a bridge builder, and we appreciate him coming on.
Excellent.
We'll do it again next week.
Let's try that. Absolutely. Thanks, Cass.
All right. So as I promised earlier in the introduction, I was going to read some emails from listeners and discuss some of that. And so I'm going to start with Caitlin in Louisville, Kentucky. She says, "Hey, my name is Kate, and I just wanted to thank you all for what you're doing with the Everyone's Agnostic podcast. I'm 21 years old. I have been married to a Christian husband for a little over a year, and I live in the good old Bible Belt. I attended a Southern Baptist church since birth and went to the school that the church housed from K through 12. About 3 months ago, I finally came to a sudden conclusion that I was an atheist, after about 3 years of struggling to reconcile my cognitive dissonance with Christianity and reality. The 3 years was a period after my freshman year of college, where a lot of dorm mates drilled me about my Christianity. I think it's also important to point out that I was never trying to lose my faith because Christianity was my entire reality. My world flipped upside down, and I had very few people in my life who would understand the transition, considering that my husband, best friends, parents, and others that I had relationships with were all Christian fundamentalists. So after doing a little searching, I found your podcast. I can't tell you how happy, relieved, excited I was to find a myriad of people who had all very similar experiences. No joke, I probably listened to about 5 podcasts per day for those first 2 weeks. It was immensely helpful and encouraging to me. Cass, I have never felt more affirmed in my decision than when I heard your story, and when you continue to point out the absurdity of it all. Bob, I'm pretty jealous of you. Only joking. But I find a lot of relief in knowing that there are people who were never tied to any kind of spirituality and are genuinely good people. As of now, I have come out to my husband, which was extremely heartbreaking. But for now, he's loving me in spite of his Christianity. And my best friend both went to the same church in high school. I also really appreciate that you all include resources and books for people to use. I have lots of catching up to do in terms of being able to defend my atheism in the same way that I knew how to defend my Christianity. You all rock. Thanks again for calling out the bullshit and reaching people like me. Kate. So a couple of things stick out to me in that post, and one was the roommates in the dorm, how they drilled her on her Christianity. And I don't know, there's just something that flags me there. I guess I hear in my head the voice of Christians saying, see, you shouldn't have surrounded yourself with unbelievers. And this is the safety that Christianity tries to create by saying, don't be hanging out with people who don't share your beliefs, because it will end up wrecking your faith. And sure enough, it did. But I guess the question then remains, what are Christians afraid of? Now, most Christians will tell you, look, if you were to apply logic and reason to this thing we call Christianity, yes, it's going to crumble. But you're missing the point. Christianity is about faith. Christianity is about trust in God to know what he's doing, even when we don't understand or it doesn't make sense to our cognitive minds. And that held water for a long time for me. It was pleasing to God to make Christianity foolishness to the wise, and so it was part of the filtration system that God used to humble you and keep you humble. Because the moment you got proud and thought you were smarter than God, then you would be like Satan and fall from heaven, because that's basically the same sin that he had, was pride, and I want to be like God, I want to know things. The tree of knowledge was forbidden. And so even after someone leaves, the Christians still have a narrative that makes sense to them. And of course, they reinforce it, especially in view of friends and family leaving, is they revisit that narrative and say, well, she hung out with atheists, they drilled her on her faith, she lost her faith. No, it's no surprise to them. In fact, they would say, you did that to yourself, or by letting yourself get out from under the umbrella of God's protection and really remaining in close with church people. The second thing was what she said there at the end, that she wants to be able to defend her atheism, and I'm very cautious about that. I think it's valid to be able to present your personal reasons as to why you don't believe, but atheism doesn't need defending. Christianity needs defending, but atheism stands alone, and truth stands alone. And I don't like the tone of getting into a conversation with a theist where the agenda is to defend your atheism. Maybe it's semantics, but I'd much rather you just be comfortable in your own skin, be comfortable in your resolutions that you've come to, and don't be defensive about those. Just let them be, present them when people are curious. But if you get the sense that people aren't in fact curious, like they're not asking, matter of fact, they're not asking to understand better. They're asking so that they can turn around and know how to counterattack you. And so it just ends up being a fruitless battle and conversation. And it's not even a conversation, it's a battle. So I understand what she meant, and she and I have dialogued since, and I'm going to read a little bit more from her, and you'll understand that I think she's kind of taken on a more mature position than the need to defend atheism. So after some dialogue, she writes back, "Thanks for replying. I've found a small community here in Louisville, Kentucky, called the Louisville Atheist and Freethinkers that I've been following, and just last Sunday went to one of their meetings. It was incredible. And thanks for the invitation. I think I would like to share my story on the show. I forgot to add that we still attend church. I eventually want to tell our young couples group what I've gone through, because I think it's important for others to know that their doubts are legitimate and that Christians do lose their faith. Any words of wisdom?" So I wrote her back. I said, "I love the thought of someone telling their fellow Christian friend group with a smile on their face, not bitter or angry, that they no longer believe in God, or sons of gods, or supernaturalistic things at all. I also encourage you to convey to them that you understand why people do believe in these things, because you yourself used to believe in them. You understand why, and you don't judge or condemn anybody who still does. The problem is that the group would not know what to do with you and probably push you away. Not just out of the group, but out of their lives. I don't know, maybe not. But if you're going to leave the group anyway, it's a respectful, mature way of saying goodbye rather than just not showing up. I would be careful to present it in a way that does not appear as a parting shot. Some will perceive it as that no matter how gentle you do it, but just try to do it as non-defensive as possible. About a month later, she writes back, "Hi, Cass. I wanted to tell you that today I told 2 leaders at my church, whom my husband and I serve under, that I was an atheist. One of them teared up and did not talk with me about it for long. I think she was just shocked and a little angry. The second tried to bring me back with arguments like, quote, 'Well, what would be the cost of you believing anyway?' Which is Pascal's wager. Another comment, 'Well, Christianity's the only religion that has a living Savior.' And what she doesn't realize is that's not true. Thirdly, she said, 'I will tell you right now that this is Satan's work,' unquote. And this is Caitlin talking. 'I was pretty proud of myself for answering her with thought-out responses that challenged her statements rather than just nodding and smiling. I still have one leader to talk with. I also told my small group of about 10 to 12 young couples who are average age 30. I don't think I've ever been so nervous in my life. They let me talk, and I went through everything that I thought was necessary to tell them. That it was not a quick decision. I wasn't trying to lose my faith. I was trying to grow closer to God, actually. Erin and I are fine," which is her husband. "I would love to talk with them individually about it. They're all very shocked, but they told me they wanted me to keep coming, and that they are here for me, and that they would pray for us. Most of it was probably just their Christianity talking, because I know that what I said came out of nowhere. So we'll see how it goes over the next few weeks. Anyway, I just wanted to share with you because I don't have people in my life who understand this transition, and this was a huge step in coming out to so many people. It's been an emotional and psychological whirlwind. Again, thanks for all that you do. I loved this week's podcast. Caitlin," which, by the way, at that time would have been episode 117 with Jeff Loken. Another letter from a listener named Kyle. He said, "Cass, I just wanted to say this latest episode of EA number 114, Alex Starr, is probably hands down the best yet. Alex was so inspirational that I just sat there and cried. Thank you. I'll be using this in the future when I hit low points in my life. Hope you guys are well. Kyle." So I responded to Kyle by inviting him on the show, which I normally do. He writes back and says, "Cass, thanks. I'll start looking through this," which is our form letter for guests. "I should probably tell you that the past 48 hours has been a tornado in my life. My wife just told me yesterday that she wanted a divorce, and emotions are escalating exponentially. We've had trouble off and on the past few years since my deconversion, but she now has stated that she can't be with a non-Christian. Obviously, my mind feels like it has exploded, and I may need to work through some of this shit before I get on the air. I need to somehow put the pieces of my life back together, find a good lawyer, find a good therapist, and figure out what I'm doing now. Not necessarily in that order. All of this while trying not to slip back into being an angry atheist, especially since she's placing the blame on me." And then he writes back again, "I just wanted to give you an update. My wife and I had a long discussion, and she agreed to a separation instead of a divorce for now, and we both are starting therapy separately. I had to do my homework to find a therapist that used evidence-based approaches, but I think I have nailed one down in the Cleveland area. We want there to be as little interruption as possible with our kids, so we are separating in the same house. That means I sleep in one bedroom and she sleeps in another. Odd? Maybe at this point, nothing surprises me. At the risk of entering too much information into the discussion, one of the things she told me was that she has absolutely zero physical attraction to me now. I didn't feel that it was fair for either of us to sit on our ass twiddling our thumbs, waiting for her to say, 'Hey, I need to have sex with you again.' If that desire is gone for her, then we both need to be adults about it and realize that we may need to date other people in the process. So we agreed that we would open the relationship up to do that. Is this helping? Maybe, maybe not. We'll find out, I guess. The odd thing is we are much closer on views than she realizes. Given the turn of events over the past few years, my deconversion being one of them, she has become a very liberal Christian. It's like she doesn't care what the Bible says. If you believe Jesus is God and he died for you, if you're going to heaven and it doesn't matter what you do. Thank you, Southern Baptist background. That's why she's okay with separation and open dating, etc., but not okay on belief in a God. It's fucking insane, but it's like you always say, cafeteria Christianity. I've had a lot of support from family and friends that have initiated discussion, so that has helped me this week. So that's where it's at. I start my therapy next Thursday. Pray for me. Ha ha ha. So I just wanted to say about the dating thing. I wrote back to him and I said, yeah, that sounds fine. Knock yourselves out. But in hindsight, and reading it a second time, I wonder if it wouldn't be a good testimony to your character, Kyle, if you actually, even though you have opened the relationship up to dating, that you do not. And maybe she will. In fact, I kind of hope she does, because in some ways, she's either going to figure out how lucky she is to have you, or the opposite. She's going to find somebody that she likes better than you. But either way, it's on her, and the truth will out. But in the long run, one of the things we have to do as atheists sometimes is to take the high road and do the more mature thing, or do the more right thing. And in order to help people understand that we can be good without God. And so I wondered if there wasn't a way in the long run for her to have been dating around and then maybe not even knowing or privy to your activities, to only find out later that you never did actually do that you wanted to remain faithful to her since you were still in, maybe, I don't know how much you regard the covenant of marriage, but at least with or without that contract. In fact, that's kind of what we're saying. Good without God is like good without a book, good without a contract. And that your faithfulness to her actually was a superior choice to her decision to date. And maybe I like the irony of the Christian being the one willing to date around while still married, and that the atheist decided to wait it out until there was full closure to date others. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud, and I'm not a therapist. But the overarching issue of how our spouses handle our deconversions, this is a big deal, and often ends up being the final straw in many marriages that were already hanging in the balance. I was fortunate that my wife worked through my changes with her own honesty and personal reflection, and found that she could find a path for herself that was compatible with mine, and in our case, even better than when we were both Christians. This is always going to be unique to each marriage and the pre-existing dynamics at play there. No two humans are alike, and we all bring our own personal histories and pathologies to the relationship. It's like a chef experimenting with different herbs, spices, vegetables, meats, etc., and discovering that some recipes produce a delicious entree and others become a disaster that he or she would never serve to his patrons. When we try to blend ourselves in intimacy with another, especially in that we are ever-evolving creatures, moving targets both, we can see that in many ways the odds are against us, becoming something beautiful and pleasant and compatible. And we're truly lucky if it ends up working out at all. I point this out to remove some of the guilt that comes with thinking that we are a failure when our marriages collapse. Often it is not an indictment on either party, but simply a matter of incompatible spices, irreconcilable differences, if you will. We should recognize that it requires a lot of maturity and flexibility on everyone's part to create a relationship that is mutually beneficial, and that every degree of rigidity and fragility that presents itself lowers the chances of the marriage surviving this metamorphosis that deconversion introduces into the mix. So cut yourself some slack if your marriage is struggling, and it happens a lot. And I don't have anything else to say other than, you know what? I can't say anything. I can't say God bless you. I don't even like saying good luck. There is some element of this that truly is and seems hopeless. And sometimes you just have to walk out that painful experience until it's in your rearview mirror and you can begin to form some semblance of a new life, of a new beginning. And that's it. That's the hard facts. This is a letter from a woman named Shonda, and she writes, "Hi Cass, my former self would begin this email by saying, 'The Lord put it on me to write you.' However, he or she didn't. I am writing to you because I wanted to let you know how comforting this podcast has been during the deconstruction of my faith. It started when I was 39. I'm now 40. I was a born-again Southern Baptist for 35 years. I was 4 years old when my parents let me walk to the altar of the church and profess my faith to Christ. I can't imagine letting my own kids do that at such a young age, but I digress. Recently, you opened up the podcast with a personal reflection. You talked about the void and how you no longer have it. Well, I do. Sometimes it is just outright scary. The voice of damnation still creeps in regularly. But thankfully, I have a badass therapist to help me through this unraveling. I listened to the opening of episode 82 3 times. I feel less alone when I listen to it. It is a process. It takes time, and to hear a voice speak, it is settling. Most days I desire for some kind of belief, either in a source or Buddha or something bigger than me. I feel like I should still have some kind of blind faith in an unknown overseer that may or may not judge me. I find myself still constantly trying to find meaning in everything. It has become exhausting. I don't want to find meaning anymore. I simply want to be. I want to do good because I feel like it, not because the Bible tells me so. And I want to be okay with not always doing good, knowing I won't go to hell or be called out in front of all creation on Judgment Day for throwing trash out of my car window. You and Bob are assets to those of us who are deconstructing in hiding. Thank you for what you do, for your honesty and humor. Sincerely, Shonda." So I went back and listened to episode 82 to remind myself of what I said, and it's one of those shows where I don't start with the Hank Green intro. It just starts with me talking slowly and contemplatively. And it was talking about the void as far as like we have this grand narrative our whole lives of, that completely makes life make sense, that there's a beginning and an end, there's order, there's purpose, there's meaning. And when we remove the Christian narrative from our scaffolding, it can create a vacuum. And it can be a scary vacuum. It can be a panic feeling of, I'm just an animal. I'm just a hominid. And I'm no really more important than a cockroach. And so that's what that dialogue on episode 82 talks about. And it's not necessarily uplifting or inspirational. It's kind of raw. But I was just confessing that I had reached a point, and maybe I was trying to be an encouragement to people on the journey that they're, it's kind of an It Gets Better campaign, is that I really don't have, not only, feel the void and the need to fill it, the need to find meaning. I've gotten really, really comfortable and maybe even delighted with what I think is the truth, and that is that life is meaningless. And other than what we give it, but even then, it's honest and wise to be honest with ourselves that we realize we are the ones giving it meaning, and that it's not really as substantial maybe as what we were used to with something that we believed in a master narrative. It's kind of plastic. It's a synthetic, versus a natural, because there is no extant meaning. There is no natural meaning to the world. But the daily unfolding of life, the 24-hour period, the cycle of life, the revolving around the sun, the movement of the seasons, the rolling of the rock up and down the hill in the myth of Sisyphus. If that doesn't drive us insane, which I think it has the potential to do, especially if it's redundant and banal and painful. Because one thing that I'm privileged is I don't have migraines. I don't have any physical ailments. I mean, they're minor. And I don't battle with depression. I'm not bipolar. I have all my faculties. So I'm acknowledging that my life is pretty simple. I mean, pretty much all my physical and, we live hand to mouth. We live month to month. We don't have any savings or retirement. But day to day, we also never go without. So I don't know. I'm just rambling. But I think that I have found something very, very exciting and exhilarating and fun about consciousness. Just being conscious. Now, I do get weary of it, which means sometimes I like to sleep. Sometimes I like to anesthetize my boredom with life with alcohol and cigarettes. But I think I'm also unashamed of my coping mechanisms. I'm doing the best I can to stay happy. And so far, it's not hurt anybody. I'm a functional alcoholic, if you will. I don't believe that, but I mean, I am functional. And I appreciate Shonda's points and that she's confessing that she still feels the void and she's tempted to give her life meaning where there is none. But that's just where she is in her journey. And I'm kind of in some ways saying that it gets better. I think for most of us, there will come a time when you actually get comfortable with not knowing and you're okay with that because you realize that in the absence of this grand narrative, there still is a lot in a daily experience, in a moment-by-moment experience. Breathing in and out is a miracle. Looking at a sunset, looking at anything. I'm just coexisting on this planet, which sometimes feels like the Matrix, that it's not actually real. But in some ways it doesn't matter because it's real enough to where we are sentient and experiencing all our senses are picking up things that we can find fascinating, because what is the opposite? The opposite is unconsciousness. It's not knowing or being present for anything, which there's coming a day for that. And I think it's good that there's an end to this, because actually eternal life of this, that sounds daunting. But in the meantime, day in and day out, experience by experience, friends, relationships, music, movies, humor, laughing, sex, eating, shitting. These things can be extremely exciting for someone who is aware that their consciousness is not taken for granted. So here's a little note from my friend Robert Dorman. And I clipped this out of some of his comments, and if I remember correctly, this was said of him, or maybe he saw that it was said of someone else. But it rang true for him as far as this could be said of me, like Cass, or just any of us who have deconverted. There are people saying this behind our backs. And this is the quote. I have someone who I consider to be a good friend who has gone the way of agnostic universalism. It hurts my heart because he was once so firm and bold in his witness, but like many of us, was led astray by philosophy and empty deceit. He lost sight of the fact that it is through faith in Christ alone that we are complete. There is nothing else to be added. Christ goes beyond the basic principles of the world into the mystery that is our faith and our conversion from sinner to saint. If you have allowed the reasoning of men and the vain philosophy of this world to seep into your beliefs, root it out. It will poison your walk and your faith. There is a mysticism to our salvation that takes faith to believe and hold on to until the day we meet him. There is a way that seems right to a man, but in the end is the way of death, unquote. So there's a lot here, and I think it's kind of cool to, listen to the voice of what people are saying out behind our backs. So I think this is interesting in that it's listening to what people are saying behind our backs. And you know it's true, and we've even said it of others maybe before we were deconverted, that it hurt our heart when we heard about people leaving the faith, and we had this distrust of philosophy and science and empty deceit, she calls it, in the wisdom of men, and that it takes Christ and faith in Christ to make us complete. And what I hear in that is that we, as humans, in the face of the reality of the absurdity of life and the meaninglessness of life, we feel incomplete. We feel less than. We feel the vacuum or the absence of a real storyline. Almost like there's got to be a happy ending. There's got to be an overarching narrative within which our lives matter. And so it's in that absence that she says you can't feel the completeness of what it means to be alive without faith in Christ. He is the answer for the world today. He's the meaning of life. And, you know, we get that. Lastly, I had a listener in Dallas write about episode 106. This is where I interviewed William Paul Young, the author of The Shack. And Paul said something in that interview that I didn't address directly. Maybe I did, but not as directly as I would have. But I was trying to be gentle. I'm always trying to be gentle with Christian guests. Actually, there was one guest way back that I wasn't gentle with, and I've already talked about that. And then he passed away, and I broke my heart that I never really got a chance to redeem that mistake, and I was not aware of it until I listened back to that episode. I think it was episode 16 with Sam Bowman. But in the meantime, I have learned to be gentle, and so I didn't counter Paul. But Paul said something that was completely ironic and maybe even absurd, and it was in reference to, you know, faith versus atheism, belief versus non-belief, and that he accused atheism and agnosticism as being the easy way, and that faith was the hard way. And I mean, I can't disagree more. I think it's the absolute opposite. And this listener, this astute listener in Dallas, he noticed it too, and he wanted to address it. And so this is his comments to Paul Young. Quote, it's too easy. Really? Try to be a fervent, lifelong believer in God, only to finally realize somewhere in your 50s that it's a crock, that there is no loving God walking beside you, guiding you, supporting you. You think that's an easy way to live life? It's the hardest thing there is. It's so hard that even when you begin to suspect that God is not all he or she was cracked up to be, it takes a long, long time to finally acknowledge that God is not there and has not actually shown up in your life or the world at large, even. From my perspective, grounding yourself by a belief in Jesus or whoever is the easy way. Unquote. And point well taken. So that's our show for this week, and some of the emails we read. I appreciate Kyle Jones for being our guest, and Bob for being my wonderful co-host and friend. So we'll talk to you next week.